We've certainly heard plenty of his story on this show. Thanks to myself and my constant, progressive, and inclusive influence, we've heard quite a bit about her story as well. But these misanthropes and homophobes have yet to hear a single syllable of their story. Are trans people simply the passive historical victims of cruel, unfair oppression and circumstance? No, they're not. Oh, God. Join us tonight when we take a look at some trans trailblazers on Deep Fat Fried. A very special episode. A very special episode. Yep. I feel like we need some like soft, like after school special, like music. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know how those go. I always try to skip those.
Yeah. I mean, I did too, but every once in a while there's nothing else to watch, you know?
This show though, every time there has you push the progressive bar on this show, Paul.
I do.
You really do.
I do. Keeping them honest, TJ. Keeping them honest.
Yeah.
Nothing more than mere virtue signaling by Paul.
This is allow me to virtue signal them with Christine Jorgensen. We're taking a look at a picture at her. First figure we're covering tonight. She was described as an ex-GI turned blonde bombshell. Christine Jorgensen. Jorgensen was the child of a carpenter from the Bronx, born in 1926 and raised as a boy. It was difficult for her to fit in, being effeminate and attracted to boys while growing up. She envied her sisters and all their dresses and dolls. This is also very common amongst trans people.
Right.
After Jorgensen graduated high school during World War II, she tried to enlist in the Army, but she was denied because of her dainty size and weight. However, a couple of months later, she was drafted, stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey. So
Fort Dix for a trans lady. Come on now.
Oh, come on, TJ. Come on.
Probably not identifying
it's
as
unfair to be
as a
stationed
woman at
there.
that point.
Dick
though.
jokes, TJ. Truly a low blow.
Yeah.
So during Jorgensen's service, she kept mostly to herself, obviously concealing her attraction to men. At the time, many service members feared being exposed or labeled as a homosexual, which could get a soldier prison time, dishonorable discharge, or court-martial. Interestingly enough, none of those things exist now, but that same attitude still exists in the military. So interesting.
Yeah. Strange.
Jorgensen explained that I wanted to be accepted by the Army for two reasons. Foremost was my great desire to belong, to be needed, and to join the stream of activities around me. Second, I wanted my parents to be proud of me. She labored as a clerical worker, managing thousands of discharged soldiers after VE Day for 14 months until she herself was I thought I was about to say horribly
discharged.
She was horribly discharged from a cannon.
What the hell?
She was honorably discharged in December 1946. So once free from her military service, Jorgensen was able to return to her passion from high school, which was photography. It was a welcome diversion from her conflicted feelings and inner struggles. Her father supported her, and they bonded over photography in the darkroom. Jorgensen wanted to transcend her father's amateur dabbling in the art, and she started to take classes at New York's Institute of Photography. While in college, she took up lots of reading, particularly medical journals, and she was finally able to find a diagnosis and treatment for all her struggles with gender identity. So there were a few options in the U.S. She traveled to Europe and eventually into the care of dangerous. Sorry.
Dangerous.
I just want this to be like a tragic story. She was horribly discharged by a dangerous endocrinologist, a Danish endocrinologist. Christian Hamburger. Cool name.
Wait,
Christian
Hamburger?
Yeah, Christian Hamburger.
I am Christian Hamburger.
That sounds like a fucking mascot for if Chick-fil-A sold burgers, maybe.
He actually inspired the name that she took after her transition, which is Christine. So she named herself after the doctor that helped her.
Cool.
And with his help and referrals, as well as special permission from the Danish Minister of Justice, she was able to get hormone replacement therapy and sex reassignment surgery.
Cool.
So after her surgeries, she said that she wanted a quiet life of her own design. But once she got back to the U.S., the only way that she could manage to earn a living was by making public appearances. She was an instant celebrity and news item when she returned to New York. I mean, this is like,
yeah, I'm assuming this is like very usual for people of the time period. They don't really like, this is not something they're like super accustomed to.
Well,
so
I mean,
like
you see how people still respond when somebody like, Elliot Page comes out.
Yeah, Elliot Page, like, look, it's a freak show. Look.
Right.
Yeah, there's just definitely a tinge of that to this, of course. It's like someone that's basically at that point, the only way they're able to earn money is by making appearances, which people like are going to make condescending comments and just stare and gawk. It's like, how is this even possible?
Yep. So her story led to this huge increase in self-understanding and acceptance amongst other trans people.
Oh.
She and her doctors received hundreds of letters asking for more information and asking for help. And she participated.
There was all kinds of people across the country that were like having these same kind of feelings that were like, like, hey, wait a minute. Oh, okay. I see what's going on here.
Yeah. This caused at least spearheaded kind of a growth in gender identity research and opportunities, including the opening in 1966 of the first gender identity clinic offering surgery in the U.S. All of these things traced to her and her influence. Over the next decade or so, more than 40 other clinics would open. She also advocated for gay equality, supported AIDS charities. The publicity following her transition and gender reassignment surgery became a model for other transsexuals for decades. She was a tireless lecturer on the subject of transsexuality, pleading for understanding from a public that all too often wanted to see transsexuals as freaks or sexual perverts. Miss Jorgensen's poise, charm, and wit won the heart of millions.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, though, the battle is still far from won on that one.
Yeah, I mean...
Still plenty of people out there spouting some ignorant bullshit even after all these decades have passed.
She was most active in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And you know what I mean? That's a long fucking time ago. And there's a long way to go for trans people still, a long hill to climb.
Yeah. No doubt about that.
She was, as far as I could tell, the first transsexual person allowed to change the gender on her driver's license. In the U.S., but was not allowed to legally marry the man that she was engaged to, typist Howard Knox, pictured here, due to him being born male. Her ex-fiancé lost his job when it came out that he had been engaged to a biological male. Christine Jorgensen's family was surprisingly supportive for the time. Her father built her a house when she returned from her surgery, and other family members helped her during her convalescence.
It probably just had to do a lot with the fact that maybe they kind of like recognized that there was like an authenticity to this, that this was not like something done on like some kind of weird whim for like a thrill or something, which is, to an outsider,
clearly not.
To an outsider, they're probably just like, oh man, it's like one of those like cross-dressing freaks or weirdos.
I want to now. I suddenly want to be woman. Like anyone comes to that decision like that. But of course, that's how they're going to portray it. Like, today I'll be a woman, tomorrow a man. Who cares?
So I got a little quote from her a little later in her life. She said, "We didn't start the sexual revolution, but I think we gave it a good kick in the pants." She goes on to say, "The answer to the problem must not lie in sleeping pills and suicides that look like accidents or in jail sentences, but rather in life and the freedom to live it." So she went on to be an entertainer, performed in many nightclubs, wanted to be a Hollywood starlet, but never made it big. Her life captivated and influenced so many that in 1970, Hollywood created a film based on her life called The Christine Jorgensen Story. 37 years after first kicking the world in the pants, she died of cancer at 62 in May of 1989. Per her request, instead of a funeral, there was a party. So, pretty cool.
Yeah. I've heard people say that, but usually it doesn't happen that way. Usually
well, she got what she wanted.
I mean, she wanted to have a party.
But usually they don't get it.
She got
and why the fuck not, dude? Why the fuck not? Give that person a party. They don't want a fucking funeral. Funerals suck.
So definitely a trans trailblazer, maybe one of the first modern trans trailblazers here in America.
Sounds like she really brought it to America. So
let's talk a little bit about Sylvia Rivera. Our next trans trailblazer, also from the Bronx, just like Christine.
What's in the water down there in the Bronx? That's what I want to know, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. Born on July 2nd, 1951, Sylvia Rivera had a troubled childhood. She was abandoned by her father shortly after birth and orphaned as a toddler when her mother committed suicide. Raised by her grandmother, she was rejected again and beaten for her effeminate behavior. Starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
In trans people at a young age. By age 11, she ran away from home, became a child prostitute, started working the Times Square area.
Times Square was very different back then.
Yes, it was a very seedy part of town. While living on the streets, she met a group of drag queens who welcomed her into their fold, and it was with their support that she became Sylvia and identified herself as a drag queen. Later in life, she said that she considered herself transgender, although she disliked labels. At the time, bars such as the mafia-run gay bar The Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, New York, were the only safe spaces where queer people could come together and form their own little de facto community.
How the mafia got involved in everything, man.
Yeah,
even though
I don't agree with it, but there's money to be made.
If there's a demand, if there's a demand that's considered,
okay, let's do it.
Well, yeah, it's underground.
That's considered not socially acceptable. The mafia is there to fucking, help.
And of course, they're not going to really rate it because the mafia, and they're already paying the police off.
I just want to say, God bless the mafia, man.
Yeah.
So in 1963, Rivera met Marsha P. Johnson, and it changed her life. Johnson was an African-American self-identified drag queen and activist. She was battling exclusion in a movement for gay rights that did not embrace her gender expression. Once again, another thing still going on in the LGBTQ community to this day. Still an argument, like whether trans people...
LGBTQIA plus 7 community. Stop your bullshit.
Rivera said of Johnson that she was like a mother to me. The two were actively involved in the Stonewall Inn uprising on June 28, 1969, when patrons of the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village, as we said, rebuffed a police raid and set a new tone for the gay rights movement. So Rivera said in an interview in 2001 that while she did not throw the first Molotov at the police, she did throw the second.
I've heard of this thing too.
Man, fuck them up.
So for 6 nights, the 17-year-old Rivera claimed she refused to go home or to sleep, saying, "I'm not missing a minute of this. It's a revolution." Her parents at the Stonewall riot, her presence at the Stonewall riot was later.
Her parents came. Her parents were dead, right?
Hey, hell of a riot.
Her presence at the Stonewall riot was later questioned, but ultimately she did more than enough LGBT activism to excuse a white lie.
I mean, I was arguing with some TERF the other day on Twitter, and I went to their profile, and they're like, "I'm not anti-trans." And I noticed they said, like, "I am an LGB advocate." I'm like,
Yeah, tell me more.
Hey, shut up. Get out of here. Fuck off. I'm just going to fall. Oh, yeah, I don't like that one. Taking that one out.
Yeah, just cross that letter off there. That's how it works, right? You just cross the letters off you don't like.
Don't like that one.
Yeah, that B. I'm not liking that B anymore either. Let's
Yeah, the B is gross. Get that out of here.
This is Sylvia with Marsha P. Johnson here. Being rabble rousers and activists and doing some direct action.
Rabbling, man.
Yep.
Rouse that rabble.
Sylvia Rivera subsequently joined the Gay Activist Alliance, or GAA, to campaign for a gay Bill of Rights in New York City. Sadly, as gay issues developed a more mainstream momentum, GAA dropped their inclusion of gender rights in a bid to make the campaign more socially acceptable. Through it all, Rivera never stopped campaigning anyway. What isn't as widely remembered is her work supporting young homeless trans girls of color that were working in the sex industry in New York at the time. Together with Marcia, her friend pictured here, they founded the Star House, which is STAR stands for, and this is kind of an anachronism now, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. It was a house to protect and care for young trans kids who were hustling on the streets. She fought continually for the inclusion of black and trans voices in the struggle for gay rights at a time when the assimilation of gay culture meant that gender rights pretty much got forgotten and left behind. And like I said, to this day are only just now starting to get recognition.
So the gays and lesbians are like, you know, they're a little more accepting of us than they are of you. So you gotta go. And I mean, you can really tell. You're not part of us anymore. We're going to the top.
From a cultural societal standpoint, it's like there's enough of these people, even though they make up such a small percentage of the population, to actually need these resources and other people, which is basically not even like community funded, just like personally by them, just like, hey, we know there's a need because people in the street are living this lifestyle. Because that's basically how I came up, because my parents were like, get the fuck out of here, or we don't want anything to do with you, or there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
So very difficult upbringing in life.
Trying to survive on the streets.
So in 1973, during the 4th annual Christopher Street Liberation Day rally in Washington Square Park in New York, Rivera challenged the gay community. After all, her exclusion was not only at the hands of middle-class white gay men, but she was also pushed to the margins by her lesbian feminist friends. She took the stage. What?
The TERFs of the day, basically.
Yep. The old school TERFs. I guess they would have been transvestite exclusionary radical feminists back in the day, probably.
Yeah, but same acronym, though.
Yep. She took the stage amidst a chorus of boos before she even said anything. In her well-known speech, which is now known as the "Y'all Better Quiet Down" speech, she shouts at the crowd that they don't care about the rights of others. This is a quote from that speech. You all tell me, go and hide my tail between my legs. I will no longer put up with this shit. I've been beaten. I've had my nose broken. I've been thrown in jail. I've lost my job. I've lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way. What the fuck is wrong with you all? Think about that. After the rally, Rivera broke down, disbanded STAR. It was a very disheartening experience for her to stand up and be booed by the very people that she had spent a whole chunk of her life very dangerously advocating for, and to be greeted with a chorus of boos was the last straw for her. So she disbanded STAR, her trans activism organization, left activism for 2 decades. In early July 1992, shortly after the New York City Pride March, her friend and fellow activist Marsha P. Johnson's body was found floating in the Hudson River off the West Village piers. Police promptly ruled Johnson's death a suicide, despite the presence of a head wound. Johnson's friends and supporters, Rivera included, insisted Johnson had not been suicidal, and a people's postering campaign later declared that Johnson had earlier been harassed near the spot where her body was found. In May 1995, Rivera tried to commit suicide by walking herself into the Hudson River. She survived and shortly afterwards dove back into activism. In the last 5 years of her life, she renewed her political activity, giving many speeches about the Stonewall Uprising and the necessity for trans rights, including drag queens and Butch Dykes, to fight for their legacy at the forefront of the LGBTQ movement. She traveled to Italy for the Millennium March in 2000, where she was acclaimed as the mother of all gay people. I don't know about that. But,
okay, I don't know. But yeah, hey, nice little word.
Yeah. In early 2001, she decided to resurrect STAR as an active political organization, now changing transvestite to transgender, which at that time was understood to include all gender nonconforming people. STAR fought for the New York City Transgender Rights Bill, Trans-Inclusive New York State Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. Basically, she just kind of fought until her last day to advance the rights of gay and trans people. On her deathbed. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to finish it up and then
the story. Yeah.
On her deathbed, she met with Matt Foreman and Joe Grabars of the ESPA to negotiate transgender inclusion in its political structure and agenda. Later, a law center was started in her name. So,
and this whole life story thing, this thing about these trans kids obviously coming from all over the country, being kicked out of their fucking their homes and stuff by parents who don't understand their weird ways of expressing themselves, all end up filtering into the streets of New York and fucking working the streets and shit. This is what fucking conservatives in this country want us to be fucking, want us to go back to, They want it to go back to the point of like no acceptance for this, zero tolerance, and they get pushed to the absolute fringes and margins of society. And these people could have just had like normal, productive, fucking all-American lives if they'd just been accepted for what they are. So, like,
I don't know. It seems easier.
Take a fucking isn't that easier and better for everybody? Like, isn't that a better fucking thing than like they have to like work the streets in fucking Times Square or whatever the equivalent?
They deserve it for their sinful ways.
Society is always going to have a fucking fringe. When you push people to that fringe, you're basically like you're ruining their lives. It's a person who fucking fought to improve the lives of people that society has needlessly fucking cast into this fucking horrible situation. Things have improved since, but it's still not great. So, like, can we just put an end to this bullshit? Can we just fucking stop?
TJ, no. But I part of big group and they part of smaller group.
Must oppress. I mean, I cannot deal with my problems.
I'd be fine with it if I just didn't have to rub shoulders with no he, she, TJ. Long as I don't have to say it or hear about it or care about it or do anything about it, I'm fine with it, I guess.
I've heard that so many fucking times.
Of course. Not to exclude trans men. This is another picture, by the way. I think that's the last picture.
It was behind the beat on that one. This is fucking Sylvia.
Yeah, that's Sylvia. So not to keep trans men out of the conversation. Our final trans trailblazer tonight, Alan L. Hart. This time, medical history made. Alan L. Hart made a breakthrough in tuberculosis research, and is the oldest of the trans folks that we've mentioned tonight. Alan Hart was born in 1890 in Kansas. His father died of typhoid fever when he was only 2. As he grew up, it became obvious that he was not interested in girlish things. Once again, just this commonality across trans people's childhoods. He preferred to play Civil War games and was said to have a passion for pocket knives and chopping wood. He was interested in sports, football, rowing, hunting, tennis, hiking. His role model from an early age was his granddad, who he would follow around and listen to while he talked about agriculture and politics. In the introduction to his book, Redressing America's Frontier, historian Peter Bogue states that Hart always regarded herself as a boy. She early claimed that she would be one if only her family would permit her to cut her hair and wear trousers. Indeed, Alan was never identified with his gender assignment of female and had no interest in romancing other boys. To distract from the awkwardness that he felt, especially having to wear a dress all the time, Alan Hart engrossed himself in studies while in school. His teacher fostered his writing talent, having him write several essays under a pen name. Later in life, Alan would publish 4 novels and a number of short stories. After graduating towards the top of his class, Alan was accepted into Stanford University, began hanging out in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, which to this day is a beacon for gay people and trans people. Yeah. He began to dress masculine publicly and pursue female romantic partners. Alan faced discrimination at the next school he attended in Oregon, yet still managed to blow away expectations, becoming the first, quote unquote, according to them, female to achieve the Sailor Medal while obtaining his doctorate.
We don't like you, but you're pretty good. So I guess, yeah, you still get it.
So they're willing to laud him with a medal, but not willing to do him the kindness of calling him by the pronouns he preserves. Gotta love that.
Yeah.
During his medical studies, he began personal research on his sexual and gender identity. He sought out professional help of a physician named Alan Gilbert. With Gilbert's help, Hart seriously began his transition into living life solely as a man. In 1917, which is very early, Gilbert removed Hart's uterus, although the reasoning to the doctor was sterilization of a homosexual and not gender affirmation. So the doctor, the doctor had his own theories about it, but in the end, it actually obviously severely helped the transition. Let's see. Hart also, at this point in history, a hysterectomy was seen as pretty much a full sex change. Hart also changed his name to Allen and permanently changed his wardrobe, which led him to pass as a male full time. Hart's past as a woman, however, continued to be problematic for him throughout his life and career, leading him to live a life that was wrought with fear and inherent difficulties. It was never made specifically clear.
And stuff,
yeah, it was never made specifically clear that his gender identity was the reason, but he continued to move and hold various positions of work all over the West and Southwest. Historians attribute these moves and continual job changes to his sex change.
Right. Because, people back then are just not going to understand on any level. A lot of people today still wouldn't understand.
Right.
So forced to kind of move around, which kind of sucks because obviously super brilliant dude. Like there's no doubt about that. Like the academic achievements kind of speak for themselves.
Unaccepting society. So what can you really do?
Despite all of that shit, he obtained a master's in public health and radiology from Yale. I don't know where that school is. Never heard of it.
Yeah, sounds vaguely familiar.
Hart moved in with his wife, Edna. They moved to Connecticut, and he became a professor at the University of Hartford as he continued to work to fight tuberculosis. He then secured a position as director of radiology at Tacoma General Hospital in 1928. So a real country crosser. Just kind of back and forth. East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, West Coast, East Coast. You know what I mean? It's kind of all over the place. This is where Allen would truly begin his life's research into the disease of TB. Also known as the Great White Plague, was one of the biggest killers in human history. And while advancements and research had been made to subdue the disease, in 1930 there was still no cure. TB was still the biggest killer in America. Over 110,000 Americans died each year from the disease, and millions more died around the world. Just a few decades later, 1 in 7 Americans were dying of the dreaded plague. So pretty fucking crazy. Alan Hart's contribution to eventually ending TB was that he realized the new technology of the X-ray could detect it. While there was still no cure, early detection could lead to quarantine and treatment that might have allowed the patient to heal on their own, and most importantly, prevented the spread of the disease, as TB is obviously highly contagious. So throughout the 1930s and the 40s, Allen and Edna would travel across the northern Midwest, planting a base in Idaho, finally, branching out to the surrounding areas. Hart conducted lectures, coordinated the training of new staff, and provided on-the-spot screenings for TB. By 1937, he was named Idaho's tuberculosis control officer. Because of the extreme stigma against TB, Allen had his clinic called the Chest Clinic so that patients could discreetly get the help they needed. So,
sure, yeah.
Another trans person that society tried their best to wad up and throw over their shoulder, denied at every turn, had to move jobs all the time because people just couldn't accept him, but still managed to make a huge contribution to the treatment and eventual curing of a deadly killer disease.
Saving countless fucking lives there. You don't know how many people would have died from that diseze by
sounds like
someone not being quarantined or getting it and not being allowed, to get away from the wrong conditions. To be honest with you, it's kind of crazy. We've just never heard of him, really. Because that's such a huge contribution to a disease that killed so many fucking people. That's like the old West disease. You watch it in a Western, he's a lunger, he's got tuberculosis. That was a super common thing to die from back then.
He's got the consumption he do.
Yep.
So
believe in the shit.
That's what I've got for you guys tonight. And I'll let you guys throw in some thoughts too. But I wanted to invite everybody that watched this episode to think about these 3 trans people the next time you say nothing I can do. Because they are proof that despite what are almost certainly hurdles that you couldn't even imagine, these 3 people came from nothing and achieved great things in the face of extraordinary discrimination.
Yeah. And I feel like these stories too are like even beyond just inspiring like trans people or whatever. Like this is the kind of shit that's like really to me typifies like, I don't know if I want to tie it uniquely to America or whatever, but like something in the human spirit about enduring and fucking rising above a shit ton of horrible obstacles and just like butting heads with an entire society of obstinate fucking morons, which I think, a lot of people have to fucking deal with that. Or even if they don't actually deal with it, they feel on some level like they do. So, I feel like it's a powerful, there's a series of powerful fucking stories, man.
I agree. And there's lots more of these. So if people enjoyed them, let me know. Scotty, you got anything you'd like to add here at the end?
No, I pretty much agree with what TJ said. I mean, I just think that if anything, Paul, I commend you to pulling these stories just because the fact that honestly, like I didn't know about a lot of this shit. It's something that doesn't really get covered that much. And maybe it should.
This is the most enlightened show on the fucking internet. You know it. We know it. Come on. Give us some accolades.
You're a crazy guy, TJ.
Give us some awards. We're so fucking good.
My, yeah, look how good we are. We're wonderful people. We're terrific.
Deep bad pride. Deep bad pride.